During my Central America trip in January 2013, I visited 3 kids in Nicaragua, and it was difficult. It was stinking hot, the driver got lost on all 3 days, and my translator was frustrating in that I sometimes had to prompt her to actually translate for me. The part that stood out to me on this trip was my visit to Antonio. This 8-year-old kid was full of life, chatty, talkative, animated. We hung out at the church for a while, drank Coke and played with my Australian football. In contrast, I noticed his mother, who looked so young and was nursing a brand new baby, didn't say a word. Even in our conversations, she almost had to be prompted. I sensed much sadness and loneliness in her life. I took Antonio, his cousin, and a few other relatives out to a chicken restaurant for lunch, and they continued to talk and sing and talk. We had a ball. Then it was time to visit the family home. Antonio's home visit was probably the hardest I had done to that point. It was the turning point, as I have entitled this story. The house was nothing more than a brick box. Dirt floor, holes in the roof, 1 bedroom. No privacy or dignity for this woman with an 8-year-old and a new baby. We sat around and chatted for a while. The conversation was driven by the project workers since I was lost for words, taking in everything around me, and still sensed Mama's sadness and shyness. We got Antonio talking. I showed him some pictures and gave him some gifts. When I do a home visit, I can normally ask to take photos of the house and can manage an, "Oh, this is lovely," even when I'm churning inside and thinking, how do they live like this day after day? Today, I just couldn't do it. It just didn't feel right. I learned that Mama was 23, so she was just 15 when she had Antonio. Antonio's father left just after he was born, and she now had a husband who was as young, if not younger than she was. He scratches an income selling newspapers at the local market. The turning point came when we ventured out into the backyard, and I use that term loosely. It was a dump, with a cinder block out in the open for a toilet. At this point, everything that had been building up inside me as I learned about their reality came crashing down. I felt the full force of their despair and hopelessness. I could not move. I had no words. After a couple of minutes, I managed to speak. Jesus, Jesus. Over and over again, that was all I could say. The next few minutes were holy, sacred, and powerful. I did the only thing I could think of. I held this beautiful young woman, and I prayed for her. I lifted her up to God. God gave me the words, and He gave me the strength to say them. Mama was overcome. Her brokenness was evident, but as I prayed, I could feel her responding and crying out to God in her spirit. The Bible says God's strength and power is made perfect in our weakness, and it was certainly true on this day. This was the turning point because God helped me to truly realize that without Him we have nothing. I guess I knew this in theory, but my wealth, prosperity, abundance, pride, self-reliance and self-sufficiency prevented me from knowing it fully. As heartbreaking as this day with Antonio and his family was in some ways, God has put 2 sparkles of blessing in their lives, compassion and Antonio's grandmother. Without compassion, Antonio wouldn't have regular food, clean water, education or medical care. And even though Antonio's father left, his grandmother stayed. I was inspired by the love and care Antonio's grandmother has for him, even though technically she has no obligation to. This is the love of God in action.